Have you ever wondered if being with someone just to avoid being alone might end up costing you more than loneliness itself? I'm not talking about some abstract philosophical question. I mean that quiet unease that creeps in at night when the house is still and you ask yourself whether you truly want to share your life or if you're just afraid to face it alone. As we grow older, that question stops being theoretical and becomes urgent because time no longer feels endless. Many people reach their 60s or 70s carrying a mix of emotional exhaustion and a deep need for companionship. After a lifetime of responsibilities, of caring for others, of holding families and relationships together, the desire not to grow old alone is completely valid. And yet, what almost no one talks about is how a relationship chosen out of fear can become a new kind of burden, quieter, subtler, but just as heavy. The promise of relief can hide a mistake that chips away at your dignity, your peace, and your inner freedom. I'm Gabriel, a longtime student and practitioner of Stoicism applied to everyday life, father and mentor in emotional boundaries and relationships in later life. On this channel, we reflect together, no magic formulas, no empty sermons, on how to live with more clarity and self-respect. If conversations like this resonate with you, I invite you to subscribe and stay with me until the end of this video because what we're going to explore today could completely change the way you see relationships at this stage of your life. What if I told you that one of the most dangerous traps of later life is confusing loneliness with emptiness? Many people reach this stage feeling that being alone is a failure, almost an anomaly that must be fixed as soon as possible. And from that place comes the urgency to have someone by their side, not because of a genuine desire to share life, but because of the fear of silence, of long nights, of feeling like they no longer matter to anyone. In this first point, when we say that loneliness can't be cured by a relationship, we're talking about dismantling a belief that society repeats endlessly and that becomes especially dangerous in your 60s or 70s. Let's look at something honestly. Loneliness is not an illness, it's part of the human condition. What does make us sick is running from it without understanding it. Many relationships that begin in later life don't arise from the meeting of two whole people, but from a silent pact between two fears. Fear of being alone, fear of growing old without witnesses, fear of not being chosen. And when a relationship begins as a way to cover up fear, that fear doesn't go away. It just puts on a mask. It sits at the table, sleeps in the same bed, and over time starts demanding more and more. Loneliness can't be cured by a relationship because no one else can fill the space we ourselves are meant to inhabit. Epictetus said that whoever relies on external things for peace becomes a slave to what they can't control. When we turn a partner into the solution for loneliness, we give them too much power. They stop being a companion and become an emotional lifeline, and no relationship can carry that kind of weight without becoming distorted. That's when jealousy, dependency, fear of loss, and tolerance for things we once wouldn't have accepted begin to appear. Maybe this scene feels familiar. Two people meet later in life, both with long histories, old wounds, and emotional fatigue. At first, it feels like a relief. Someone calls, someone asks how you are, someone fills the space. But over time, one starts to feel like they have to adjust too much, give in too much, stay quiet too often, because deep down, there's one silent thought running the show. Better this than being alone. And that thought, even if it's never said out loud, slowly wears away at your dignity. When I say that loneliness can't be cured by a relationship, I'm not promoting isolation or rejecting love. I'm pointing out that there's a big difference between choosing companionship and running from yourself. The kind of loneliness that hurts doesn't go away just because someone is beside you. It eases when you learn to be with yourself without resentment. Seneca warned that if you can't stand your own company, you'll hardly find peace in someone else's. And in later life, This becomes an uncomfortable but liberating truth. Wrapping up this first point means understanding something essential for everything that follows. Before asking yourself who you want to share your life with, it's worth asking how you feel when you're on your own. Because if loneliness feels like punishment, then a relationship becomes an escape. And a relationship built as an escape rarely becomes a place of peace. There's a truth that often hurts when spoken aloud, but becomes impossible to ignore in later life. No relationship can hold up what you haven't learned to hold within yourself. And when we talk in this second point about self-love before companionship, we're not talking about narcissism or shutting yourself off from the world. We're talking about something much simpler and much more demanding: a deep respect for your own life. Many people reach their 60s or 70s with a long history of giving. They gave their time, energy, patience, bodies, and silence. They raised children, supported partners, cared for parents, fulfilled roles. And without realizing it, they put themselves off for so long, they became indistinguishable from their responsibilities. When that all begins to ease, when the children no longer need you, or the partner is no longer there, what shows up isn't a lack of love from others, but a lack of inner presence. At that moment, seeking companionship without first rebuilding self-love is like inviting someone into a house that's still in ruins. At its core, self-love before companionship means something very tangible. It means being able to look in the mirror without feeling ashamed, for needing rest, for wanting peace, for saying no. It means understanding that setting boundaries isn't cruelty, it's emotional hygiene. Marcus Aurelius said no one can harm us unless we give them permission. And often, in later life, that permission is given out of fear of being alone, accepting patterns that slowly wear away at your self-esteem. Take an honest look at how many relationships at this stage are built on quiet sacrifice. One person adapts too much, gives in too much, tries not to be a bother, not to ask too much, not to be a burden, all in the name of companionship. But a relationship where you shrink yourself just so the other person won't leave isn't a relationship, it's a silent negotiation against yourself. And over the years, that cost shows up in the form of resentment, exhaustion, and sadness. When we talk about self-love in this second point, we're talking about the ability to be okay even without outside approval. Viktor Frankl believed that human dignity doesn't depend on circumstances, but on our inner stance toward them. If your self-worth depends on being chosen, called, or kept around by someone else, then you're not sharing your life. You're constantly asking for proof that you matter. And no healthy love can grow from that kind of need. With that in mind, you'll understand why companionship only adds value when it enters a life that already has a strong center. Self-love doesn't cancel the desire to share. It puts it in order. It makes a partner a complement, not a crutch. It lets you say, I want to be with you, but I won't lose myself without you. And that difference, subtle as it may seem, completely changes the quality of a relationship. To close this second point is to accept an uncomfortable but freeing responsibility. Before inviting someone to walk beside you, make sure you're not abandoning yourself in the process. Because when self-love is strong, companionship is a joy. But when it's missing, companionship becomes an elegant way of continuing to forget yourself. When did we start believing that a relationship could fix everything life has worn down inside us? It's an uncomfortable question, but a necessary one, especially as we dive into this third key point. Many relationships in later life don't begin from deep connection, but from a quiet expectation that the other person will bring back meaning, excitement, the will to live, or even a lost sense of identity that's faded over the years. And when a relationship begins with the mission to save, it almost always ends up draining. Here, when we talk about the mistake of expecting someone else to save us, we're not talking about moral weakness, we're talking about human exhaustion. After decades of responsibilities, losses, sacrifices, and the inevitable blows of life, the longing naturally arises for someone to come and ease the weight. But placing the burden of past frustrations, old guilt, or existential emptiness on a partner is asking for something no human being can carry without eventually breaking or growing resentful. I've seen this scenario play out many times. One person enters a relationship hoping to feel alive again, important, desired, needed, and at first it works. The other listens, supports, cares. But over time, that hope turns into demand. It's no longer about choosing to share, it becomes about needing to be filled. And what began as companionship becomes a lopsided relationship, where one person becomes the emotional pillar of the other. That's not mature love. It's disguised dependency. Epictetus warned that when you place your well-being in someone else's hands, you live at the mercy of their mood, their presence, and their willingness to stay. In later life, this mistake becomes especially costly because emotional energy is no longer limitless. When you're waiting to be saved, you start accepting things you wouldn't have before. You tolerate painful silences, overlook disrespect, all just to hold on to what you think is keeping you afloat. At this point, I'd like to pause with you for a moment. If what you're hearing is resonating, I invite you to take a short break. Subscribing to this channel and leaving a comment with your name and the country you're watching from isn't just a routine gesture. I read every comment, and this space exists so you don't have to feel like you're navigating these reflections alone. There are many of us walking through the same questions, even if we don't always speak them aloud. Now back to the heart of the matter. Wanting someone else to save us often hides a silent guilt. Guilt over past mistakes, for having tolerated too much, for having failed in previous relationships. So we start believing that this new partner must make up for it all, restore what was lost. But no relationship can heal the past if we haven't first made peace with ourselves. Viktor Frankl said that when we don't find meaning within, we start demanding it from the outside, and that inevitably puts pressure on any relationship. To close this third point is to accept a truth that frees, even if it stings. A partner can walk with you, share the journey, be by your side, but they can't carry the weight of saving you from yourself. When we stop looking for saviors, we begin to relate from a more honest, lighter, and more dignified place. And only then does love stop being a lifeline and become a true connection. For years, we were led to believe that being emotionally independent meant being distant, cold, or unloving. And in later life, that confusion can be deeply harmful, pushing many people to stay in suffocating relationships just to avoid seeming detached or insensitive. In this fourth point, I want us to calmly look at something essential. Emotional independence doesn't kill love, it makes it cleaner. Emotional independence means being able to be with someone without needing them to feel whole. It's not about not loving, it's about not begging. It's not about shutting down, it's about not losing yourself. In later life, when emotional exhaustion starts to weigh heavy, this distinction becomes vital. An independent person can enjoy closeness without fear because they know that if the other leaves, their inner world won't collapse. And that kind of security, far from creating distance, usually leads to healthier and more honest relationships. Emotional independence isn't coldness because true independence doesn't hide behind walls. It's grounded in strong roots. Musonius Rufus said that real strength isn't about hardening the soul, but about putting it in order. When someone doesn't depend emotionally on their partner, they can listen without fear, set boundaries without guilt, and love without anxiety. They don't need to monitor, control, or constantly adapt to keep the relationship alive. Look closely at how many relationships in later life are held together by fear. Fear that the other will get tired, pull away, grow cold. That fear leads to surveillance, to staying silent about what hurts, to tolerating the intolerable. That's not deep love, it's insecurity in disguise. Emotional independence, on the other hand, allows for something far more valuable, choosing the other person each day without feeling trapped. In this fourth point, I want you to picture something clearly. Two people who need each other cling tightly. Two emotionally independent people walk side by side because they want to, not because they're afraid of falling. The first kind of relationship is often intense but fragile. The second may be calmer but far more stable. And in later life, calm stops being boring. It becomes a luxury. Modern psychology confirms what the Stoics already sensed. People with more secure attachment styles, those who aren't in a constant state of emotional alert, are capable of more lasting and respectful relationships, not because they love less, but because they don't confuse love with fusion. Loving someone doesn't mean disappearing into them. It means meeting each other without losing yourself. To close this fourth point is to reclaim a truth that restores dignity. You don't need to become cold to be independent. You need to become solid on the inside. When emotional independence is in place, a relationship stops being a shelter from fear and becomes a space where two people can share from a place of peace. And that peace, especially after 60, is worth more than any fleeting promise of intensity. There's something deeply sad that happens when, after a lifetime of fulfilling duties, a relationship stops being a place of relief and turns into yet another burden. In later life, many people don't enter into relationships to share, but to feel useful again, to feel needed or indispensable. And without realizing it, they repeat the same pattern that exhausted them for years. In this fifth point, I want us to honestly examine the moment a relationship stops adding value and starts weighing us down. A healthy relationship at this stage of life should bring lightness, not more hidden demands. Yet it's common to end up taking on the role of emotional caretaker, constant supporter, or obligatory presence. Calls aren't made out of desire, but out of expectation. Time together is no longer a choice, but a duty. And when love starts to feel like a checklist of responsibilities, something essential has quietly gone off course. At this point, when a relationship becomes a new obligation, a silent phrase often arises that few dare to say out loud: I'm tired. Tired of explaining, of managing someone else's moods, of carrying the weight of their unresolved past. But because the fear of being alone still lingers in later life, that exhaustion gets covered up with resignation. The wear and tear gets normalized, justified as just part of loving, when in reality, it's a clear sign of imbalance. Seneca warned that poverty isn't having little, but needing too much. A partner who needs too much, emotionally, ends up draining the other. Not out of malice, but out of unconscious habit. And in later life, when emotional energy is more valuable than ever, maintaining a relationship that drains you becomes a slow betrayal of yourself. Let's look closely at something important in this fifth point. Many people confuse commitment with constant sacrifice. They believe that to love is to endure, to give in, to put themselves last. But healthy commitment doesn't kill joy. It protects it. If every encounter leaves you more drained than calm, more tense than comforted, more obligated than eager, you're not in a nourishing relationship, you're reenacting old roles you once learned to survive. Modern psychology shows that the relationships that thrive in later life are those where both people maintain their own space, their own rhythm, and their own respected silence. It's not about living apart, it's about not invading each other, about not demanding that your partner fill what you haven't dared to build within yourself. When a relationship takes up all your emotional space, it ends up suffocating what it was meant to nurture. To close this fifth point is to ask a question that takes courage. Does this relationship give me peace, or does it ask more of me than I can give without breaking? Because at this stage of life, love shouldn't feel like another item on your to-do list. It should feel like a place to rest, And when it stops being that, continuing isn't loyalty, it's fear dressed up as devotion. As we arrive at this final point, I want us to reflect on a difference that may seem small, but in later life, it defines the entire future of a relationship. Sharing your life is not the same as depending on someone to feel that life is worth living. And when we talk about choosing to share, not to depend, we're talking about the highest and calmest form of love possible after 60. Choosing to share means your life already has meaning, rhythm, and direction, even when no one is beside you. It's not a perfect life, nor closed off to others. It's a life you're fully inhabiting. From that place, a partner doesn't come to fill voids. They come to add presence. They don't come to rescue you. They walk alongside you. Marcus Aurelius said that peace begins when we stop asking the outside world to complete us, and applying this idea to relationships transforms everything. In this sixth point, choosing to share, not depend, means being able to say, I want to be with you without feeling like, without you, I'm lost. It means enjoying closeness without fear, because distance no longer feels like a threat. Two people who choose each other from a place of wholeness don't cling. They accompany. They don't monitor, they respect. They don't demand to be each other's savior, they offer honest presence. And that kind of relationship, though quieter, is infinitely deeper. Many people fear that this kind of love might be cold or distant, but the opposite is true. When there's no dependence, there's more freedom to love. When there's no constant fear of loss, there's more space for tenderness. Neuroscience confirms it. Relationships without emotional hyperactivation generate greater feelings of safety and lasting well-being. They may not produce extreme highs, but they do offer real stability. And in later life, stability stops being boring and becomes deeply desirable. Choosing to share also means accepting something essential. Not everyone who appears at the stage is ready for this kind of bond. Some seek refuge, some seek validation, some seek not to feel alone at any cost. Having stoic awareness means knowing when to walk away from a relationship that demands dependence instead of presence. Not out of harshness, but out of clarity. Epictetus said that freedom begins when we stop bargaining with our peace. To close this sixth point is to return to the heart of this video's message. Being in a relationship after 60 is not a mistake in itself. The real mistake is entering one without understanding where you're coming from. When you choose to share, not depend, a relationship stops being a threat to your dignity and becomes a mature expression of your inner freedom. And only from that place does love stop being a need and become a conscious choice. Throughout this journey, we've looked straight at a question many avoid asking out loud. Not whether it's good or bad to have a partner after 60, but where that relationship is truly coming from. We've seen that loneliness isn't solved by just having someone next to you, that self-love isn't optional. It's the foundation, that expecting someone else to save us ends up draining both people, that emotional independence doesn't kill love, it brings it into balance, that a partner should never become a new obligation, and that true maturity lies in choosing to share, not to depend. None of this is about rejecting love, it's about dignifying it. If there's one idea I hope you take with you today, it's this simple but powerful truth. In later life, love no longer has to be an urgent need. It can become a conscious choice. It's no longer about avoiding loneliness at any cost, but about not betraying yourself just to avoid feeling alone. Stoicism reminds us that inner peace is non-negotiable, and no companionship is worth losing the calm, self-respect, or inner freedom we've worked so hard to build. I'm deeply grateful you made it this far and gave yourself this time for reflection. This channel exists to walk alongside real people with long stories, with valid exhaustion, and with a genuine desire to live the rest of life with more clarity and less guilt. We don't promise magic solutions, but we do offer conversations that awaken awareness. If this video resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you. Leave this phrase in the comments. I choose to share without losing myself. Reading your words reminds me that we're not alone in asking these questions. Thank you for being here, for thinking, for questioning. We'll meet again in the next video with the same calm, the same strength, and the same respect for the life we still have ahead.